Never before has a woman faced such a heartbreaking betrayal, nor found such an unexpected path to salvation. Imagine a world where your own flesh and blood could deem you worthless, an outcast, simply for a biological truth beyond your control. This is the world that swallowed Clara Mae Johnson whole, a world where a woman's worth was measured by her ability to bear children. What if everything you thought you knew about family, loyalty, and even love was about to be shattered and then miraculously rebuilt in the most unlikely of places? Clara Mae, a woman of quiet strength and gentle spirit, had always dreamed of a life filled with laughter and the pitter-patter of tiny feet. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. When doctors delivered the devastating news of her infertility, her parents, pillars of their small frontier community, saw not a daughter, but a broken vessel, an empty promise. They saw an opportunity. They saw a debt. In a transaction as cold as a winter wind, they sold her. Not into servitude, not into marriage, but into a life of indentured labor, a living commodity exchanged for their own financial solvency. Every day she spent toiling in the fields. The bitter taste of their betrayal lingered, a constant reminder of her perceived failure. Then came the day the Comanche rode into their valley. Fear gripped the settlement, a primal terror of the unknown. But amid the chaos, a lone warrior, his face etched with a lifetime of battles and burdens, saw something different in Clara Mae's eyes. His name was Grey Wolf, a man whose own life had been shaped by loss, a widower raising 5 children on his own. He was a chieftain, yes, but also a father, burdened by the need for a mother's touch in his teepee. No one could have predicted what happened next. In a move that defied all logic, all custom, Grey Wolf approached Clara Mae's bewildered parents. He didn't offer threats. He offered a trade. He offered hope. He offered a home to the woman they had cast aside. Her parents, seeing only the chance to profit further, readily agreed. Clara Mae was thrust into a world utterly alien, a world of vast plains, ancient traditions, and a man who saw past her perceived flaws to something truly valuable. But how could a heartbroken woman, abandoned by her own, find a new purpose, a new love, in the arms of a lonely Comanche chieftain with 5 wild children who knew nothing of her world? And what hidden dangers lurked just beyond the horizon, threatening to tear apart this fragile, unexpected family before it even had a chance to bloom? The dust, fine as powdered bone, coated everything in Sweetwater Gulch. It clung to the rough-hewn planks of the general store, settled on the brim of every hat, and seemed to infuse the very air with a gritty despair. For Elara Vance, it felt as if the dust had seeped into her very soul, a constant reminder of her barrenness. She stood by the counter, meticulously folding bolts of calico, her movements precise, almost mechanical. Her parents, Martha and Thomas Vance, sat at a small table in the corner, their hushed voices carrying just enough for Elara to catch snippets of their conversation. "We can't keep her," Martha whispered, her voice tight with a familiar strain. "Another mouth and no promise of a future." Thomas grunted in agreement, his gaze fixed on the worn floorboards. "The land's dry. The cattle are thin. We need a solution, Martha. A final one." Elara's heart, though accustomed to such pronouncements, still gave a sharp, painful lurch. She tightened her grip on the fabric, her knuckles white. For years, since the doctor's grim diagnosis when she was barely a woman, her inability to bear children had been a dark cloud hanging over their small, struggling ranch. In their world, a woman's worth was often measured by the children she produced, and Elara, through no fault of her own, had been found wanting. A sudden, unexpected cough from her father startled her. He cleared his throat loudly, then turned his gaze directly to her. "Elara," he began, his voice devoid of its usual gruffness, replaced by an unsettling, almost gentle tone. "There's an opportunity." Elara looked up, a flicker of something akin to hope, fragile and easily extinguished, sparking within her. She had learned to be wary of her father's opportunities. "Mr. Silas Blackwood," Martha interjected, her eyes bright with a disturbing eagerness. "He's a widower from over near the Comanche lands. Lost his wife and his. His first 2 children to the fever. He's looking for a new start, a new family. Elara felt a cold dread creep up her spine. A new family? She echoed, her voice barely a whisper. Thomas nodded, avoiding her gaze. He's willing to take you in, Elara. Provide for you. A new life. He paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, he has 5 children already, from his first marriage. The words hit Elara like a physical blow. 5 children. A stark, brutal contrast to her own emptiness. This wasn't an opportunity, it was a transaction. They weren't seeking a husband for their daughter. They were selling her, disposing of a burden. The hope she had felt moments before shriveled and died, replaced by a bitter understanding. Her parents, desperate and hardened by their own struggles, saw her not as a daughter, but as a problem to be solved. And Silas Blackwood, a lonely widower, was their solution. A solution that promised a new life, yes, but one built on the foundation of her own deepest sorrow. The silence that followed her father's words was thick, suffocating. Elara felt the fragile hope she'd momentarily harbored shatter, scattering like dust motes in the harsh afternoon light. This wasn't an opportunity for her, but for them. Her parents, Martha and Thomas Vance, had found a convenient way to shed a burden, a solution born of desperation and the unforgiving realities of their hardscrabble life. Silas Blackwood, a name she barely registered, was Merrill. Why a vehicle for her disposal? The bitterness that welled within her was a familiar taste, acrid and sharp. Her mother, Martha, ever the pragmatist, broke the quiet. It's a good match, Elara. He needs a wife, someone to look after his children. And you need a home. The words were delivered with a practiced kindness that Elara saw through instantly. It wasn't about her needs, but about their convenience. Thomas, less articulate than his wife, simply nodded, his gaze unwavering. He'll be here tomorrow, just after dawn. Best to be ready. Ready for what? Elara wondered. To be sold like a mare past her prime? The thought was a searing brand on her soul. She swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry, and turned back to the calico, her fingers fumbling with the soft fabric. Each fold felt like another layer of her life being neatly packed away, discarded. That night, the small cabin felt colder than usual, despite the dying embers in the hearth. Elara lay on her cot, staring at the rough-hewn ceiling, the image of Silas Blackwood, a man she'd never met, looming in her mind. He was a widower, her mother had said, with children. A ready-made family, a ready-made life for a woman deemed unworthy of creating her own. The injustice of it all burned, a slow, smoldering fire. She had always imagined a different path, a husband who loved her for herself, a life built on shared dreams, not on her perceived failings. A sudden, sharp rap on the cabin door jolted her from her troubled thoughts. It was still dark outside, the pre-dawn chill seeping through the thin walls. Thomas grumbled, pulling on his trousers, while Martha sat bolt upright, her eyes wide. "He's early," she whispered, a note of frantic excitement in her voice. Elara's heart pounded against her ribs. This was it. The moment she became someone else's property. Her father opened the door, and a tall, shadowy figure filled the frame. He wasn't Silas Blackwood. This man was different, his silhouette broader, his stance more imposing. He wore a buckskin tunic and leggings, his long, dark hair braided. He carried a rifle with an unsettling ease. "I am Two Hawks," the man announced, his voice deep and resonant, utterly devoid of the polite deference she expected from a white man. "I have come for the woman, Elara." Elara's breath hitched. This was not the arrangement. This was not Silas Blackwood. Her parents exchanged bewildered glances, their faces pale in the dim light. This twist, this unexpected arrival, shattered the carefully constructed narrative they had presented. Who was this man, and why did he claim her? The air crackled with unspoken questions, and Elara felt a strange, terrifying flicker of something new. Not hope, but a raw, desperate curiosity. The stranger, a man whose presence filled the small store, turned his gaze from Elara's parents to Elara herself. His eyes, dark and unreadable, held a depth that seemed to bypass her outward appearance, seeing something within her that herself couldn't quite define. He did not introduce himself, nor did he offer an explanation for his sudden appearance. Instead, he simply stated, his voice a low rumble, "She comes with me." Thomas Vance, regaining a sliver of his composure, stepped forward, a forced smile plastered on his face. "Now see here, sir, there seems to be a misunderstanding. This is our daughter, Elara. We had an arrangement with Mr. Silas Blackwood." The stranger cut him off, a subtle shift in his posture, conveying an undeniable authority. "There is no misunderstanding. The arrangement has been fulfilled." He gestured vaguely toward a heavy leather pouch that now rested on the counter, its contents clearly substantial enough to silence any further protest from Martha and Thomas. Elara watched, a cold dread mixing with that unsettling curiosity, as her parents' faces transitioned from confusion to a calculating acceptance. The sight was a familiar ache, a confirmation of her long-held suspicion that her worth was always quantifiable, always negotiable. Elara's own voice, when it emerged, was a fragile whisper. "Who are you?" The man finally looked at her fully, a flicker of something unreadable in his dark eyes. "My name is Weah. You will come with me now." There was no question in his tone, only a quiet command. He did not offer comfort, nor did he explain the abrupt shift in her destiny. Elara felt a strange sense of detachment, as if she were watching a play unfold, with herself as the reluctant lead. This was not the future her parents had painted, not the predictable, if unappealing, path with Silas Blackwood. This was something entirely unknown, a plunge into a vast, uncharted wilderness. As Weah turned to leave, Elara's mother, Martha, suddenly found her voice. But what about her things? Her trousseau?" Weah paused at the door, his back to them. "She will need nothing of this place," he said, his voice flat. Elara felt a peculiar pang, a mix of relief and a sharp, sudden loss. Everything she had ever known, every thread of her existence, was being severed, not gently, but with a clean, decisive cut. She glanced at her parents, their faces now devoid of all but a faint, lingering apprehension, and knew there would be no farewells, no lingering goodbyes. Her life in Sweetwater Gulch, defined by dust and disappointment, was over. Elara took a deep breath, the air tasting different already, and followed Weah out into the blinding sunlight, stepping into a future as vast and unknown as the plains before her. The vastness of the plains swallowed them whole, the horizon stretching endlessly in every direction. Elara rode beside Weah, the rhythmic thud of the horses whose a constant counterpoint to the wind's whisper. Days blurred into a tapestry of sun-baked earth and starlit nights. Weah, a man of few words, communicated more through gestures and quiet observation. He taught Elara how to track, how to identify edible plants, and how to listen to the land itself. She found a strange peace in the quiet rhythm of their journey, a stark contrast to the suffocating tension of Sweetwater Gulch. One evening, as the sun dipped below the distant mesas, painting the sky in fiery hues, Weah pointed to a cluster of cottonwoods by a winding river. "Home," he grunted, his voice a low rumble. Elara's stomach tightened with a mix of anticipation and dread. This was it, the moment she would meet the children, the true test of her new life. She had imagined them endlessly, shy, curious, perhaps even resentful. They approached the encampment, a collection of hide lodges nestled among the trees. Smoke curled lazily from a central fire, and the scent of roasting meat wafted on the breeze. Suddenly, a whirlwind of small figures erupted from one of the lodges, racing towards Weah with joyous shouts. 4 boys and a girl, their faces bright with excitement, swarmed him, clinging to his legs, vying for his attention. Elara watched, a knot forming in her throat. Their laughter was infectious, their energy boundless. Weah, his stoic demeanor softening, introduced them one by one. Tall Bear, the eldest, already carrying himself with a quiet strength, Swift Arrow, quick and mischievous, Little Hawk, observant and thoughtful, and the twins, Playful Thunder and Gentle Willow. Willow, the only girl, had eyes that mirrored her father's, deep and knowing. She regarded Elara with an unblinking gaze that felt both innocent and unnervingly perceptive. The children, surprisingly, did not shy away. Instead, they circled Elara, their curiosity overcoming any apprehension. Thunder, the bolder twin, tugged at her skirt, his small hand surprisingly strong. "Are you our new mother?" he asked, his voice clear and direct, cutting through the evening air like a sharpened arrow. Elara froze, caught off guard by the blunt question. She looked to Weah, who simply watched her, his expression unreadable. The weight of the question, the hope and expectation in the child's eyes, pressed down on her. This was the moment. This was the true beginning, or the swift end of her precarious new existence. She knelt, bringing herself to the children's level, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She had no answer ready, no prepared speech. The truth, raw and unvarnished, was all she had. Elara took a deep breath, the dry desert air filling her lungs, a stark contrast to the stifling silence that had always surrounded her inability to bear children. "I cannot have children," she stated, her voice clear and steady, devoid of the shame that had once crippled her. She watched the children's faces, braced for the inevitable recoil, the sudden shift in their bright eyes. Instead, the small boy, no older than 6, stepped forward. His face was smudged with dirt, but his eyes held a wisdom far beyond his years. "Our mama is in the stars," he said simply, his gaze unwavering. "She is always with us. But she is not here to tell us stories or mend our clothes. Our father says we need a woman who is kind. Are you kind?" Elara's heart, which had been preparing for rejection, instead swelled with an unexpected warmth. This was not the world she knew, where worth was measured by fertility. This was a world where kindness mattered more than progeny. A tear, unbidden, traced a path through the dust on her cheek. "I am," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I will try to be very kind." Silas, who had been watching the exchange with an intensity that made Elara's skin prickle, stepped forward. He knelt beside her, his presence a comforting anchor. "Elara has a good heart," he said to his children, his voice low and resonant. "She has traveled far to be with us." He looked at Elara, his dark eyes searching hers. "Is this truly what you wish, Elara? To stay with us, to be a mother to these children, knowing what it means?" The weight of his question, the unspoken implications, settled around them. This was not a casual arrangement. This was a commitment, a promise to a future she had never dared to dream of. For a fleeting moment, the faces of her parents, Martha and Thomas Vance, flashed in her mind's eye, their disappointment a familiar ache. She remembered their cold calculations, their willingness to discard her. Here, in this desolate, beautiful land, she was being offered something entirely different: a purpose, a family, a home. She looked at the children, their small hands reaching out to touch her dress, their faces filled with an innocent hope. She looked at Silas, his steady gaze offering a silent strength. A profound sense of belonging, alien yet deeply comforting, washed over her. "It is," she affirmed, her voice gaining strength with each word. "It is what I wish. More than anything." A small cheer erupted from the children, their joy infectious. The youngest, a tiny girl with braids, threw her arms around Elara's neck, a trusting embrace that sealed the moment. Just then, a rider approached, kicking up a plume of dust. It was Mr. Silas Blackwood, her father's opportunity, a man whose reputation for ruthlessness preceded him. He reined in his horse, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. Elara, surrounded by the Comanche children, Silas's hand resting protectively on her shoulder. A sneer twisted his lips. Well, Blackwood drawled, his voice laced with venom. "Looks like the barren woman found herself a new home. Or did you just run off, Elara, like the coward you always were?" Silas stepped forward, his hand still on Elara's shoulder, a silent testament to his unwavering support. "She found a home where she is valued, Blackwood," he stated, his voice low but firm, cutting through the man's sneering words. "A place where her worth is not measured by the narrow expectations of your world." The Comanche children, sensing the tension, huddled closer to Elara, their small faces reflecting a fierce protectiveness. Blackwood's eyes, cold and calculating, flickered from Silas to Elara, then to the children. A cruel smile spread across his face. Valued? For what exactly? For being a burden? A barren woman has no place here among true families. He spat the words, aiming to wound, to diminish Elara in front of her new kin. Elara felt a familiar sting, a deep ache that had resonated within her for years. But this time, it was different. It was not the crushing despair of before, but a surge of defiant anger. She stepped out from under Silas's hand, her chin lifting. "My worth," Elara began, her voice surprisingly steady, "is not for you to decide, Mr. Blackwood. It was your expectations that nearly destroyed me, that sold me like chattel." Her gaze met his, unwavering. "I was not a coward then, and I am certainly not one now." The air crackled with the unspoken history between them, the raw wounds of her past laid bare. Blackwood's face contorted, his smugness replaced by a flash of genuine surprise, then fury. He had expected tears, shame, a broken spirit. Instead, he found resolve. "You dare defy me, girl," he growled, reaching for the pistol at his hip. Before his hand could close around the grip, a blur of motion, swift and silent, intervened. One of the older Comanche boys, no more than 12, had darted forward, a small, intricately carved wooden spear, a toy really, but sharp-pointed, now pressed firmly against Blackwood's horse's neck. The animal whinnied, startled, and Blackwood froze, his hand hovering over his weapon. Silas stepped fully in front of Elara, his posture radiating quiet authority. "This is our land, Blackwood. You are not welcome here, nor is your poisonous rhetoric." He spoke in Comanche, a rapid, guttural exchange with the boy, who slowly lowered the spear but remained watchful. Blackwood, outmaneuvered and clearly unnerved by the unexpected defiance from a child, hesitated. He glanced around, realizing he was outnumbered, deep within territory he did not control. His eyes narrowed one last time at Elara, a promise of future malice in their depths. "This isn't over." "Elara," he spat, then reined his horse around, kicking it into a gallop, disappearing back the way he came, leaving only a cloud of dust and the lingering stench of his malice. The tension in the clearing slowly dissipated. Elara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Silas turned to her, his gaze soft, understanding. "He will not trouble you here again," he promised, his hand gently finding hers. The children, seeing the threat gone, rushed forward, embracing Elara, their small bodies a warm, comforting shield. In their eyes, Elara saw not pity, not judgment, but pure, unconditional acceptance. She had faced her past, not as a victim, but as a survivor, surrounded by a family who saw her not for what she lacked, but for all that she was. This was home, a place of belonging, a love born not of obligation, but of true connection. The dust still settled, but it no longer felt like despair. It felt like the ground, ding of new roots. Elara watched the last wisps of smoke curl from the council fire, the embers glowing like tiny, hopeful eyes in the deepening twilight. The chief's words still echoed in her heart, a powerful affirmation of her place, not as a barren woman, but as a valued member of their family, a mother to 5 children, and a wife to a man who saw past what others deemed a flaw. She had faced her parents not with anger, but with a quiet strength forged in the heart of the Comanche nation. Their stunned faces, their hurried retreat, had been a testament to her transformation. The woman they had sold was gone. A new, formidable Elara stood in her place. She found Weah standing by the river, his silhouette etched against the setting sun. He turned, his eyes, so often stoic, softened as they met hers. He didn't need words. He understood the weight that had lifted from her shoulders. For so long, she had carried the shame of her infertility, a burden imposed by a society that valued only one kind of fruitfulness. Here, with Weah with his children, she had discovered a different kind of abundance. The youngest, little Chayton, ran towards them, his small legs pumping, his laughter a joyful melody. He launched himself into Elara's arms, burying his face against her. She held him close, inhaling the scent of wood smoke and childhood. This was her family, her true home. This was the life she had never dared to dream of, a life not defined by what she lacked, but by what she had gained. Elara looked up at Wea, a silent promise passing between them. The plains stretched out before them, vast and untamed, much like the future they would build together. She had come to him broken, abandoned, and believing herself worthless. He had seen her not for her perceived failings, but for her inherent worth, her capacity for love, and her unwavering spirit. The scars of her past remained, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they were a testament to the journey she had endured, a journey that had led her to a love more profound and a family more complete than she could ever have imagined. Her heart, once a barren landscape, now bloomed with a vibrant, enduring love.